The Call of the Wild, Jack London, 7 of 20. At another time, speech went through, dragging the whole team after him up to Buck, who strained backward with all his strength, his forepaws on the slippery edge, and the eyes quivering and snapping all around. But behind him was Dave, likewise straining backward, and behind the sled was Francois, pulling till his tendons cracked. Again the rim ice broke away before and behind, and there was no escape except up the cliff. Pero scaled it by a miracle, while Francois prayed for just that a miracle. And with every thong and sled lashing and the last bit of harness rope into a long rope, the dogs were hoisted one by one to the cliff crest. Francois came up last after the sled and load. Then came the search for a place to descend, which descent was ultimately made by the aid of the rope, and night found them back on the river with a quarter of a mile to the day's credit. By the time they made the Hutalinka and got ice, Buck was played out. The rest of the dogs were in like condition, but Pero, to make up the lost time, pushed them late and early. The first day they covered 35 miles to the Big Salmon, the next day 35 more to the Little Salmon, the third day 40 miles, which brought them well up towards the Five Fingers. Buck's feet were not so compact and hard as the feet of the Huskies. He had softened during the many generations since the day his last wild ancestor was tamed by a cave dweller or riverman. All day long he limped in agony, and camp once made, lay down like a dead dog. Hungry as he was, he would not move to receive his ration of fish, which Francois had to bring to him. Also, the dog driver rubbed Buck's feet for half an hour each night after supper, and sacrificed the tops of his own moccasins to make 4 moccasins for Buck. This was great relief, and Buck caused even the vision the face of Pero to twist itself into green one morning, when Francois forgot the moccasins and Buck lay on his back, his forefeet waving appealingly in the air, refused without them. Later, his feet grew hard to the trail, and the worn-out foot gear was thrown away. At the Pelly one morning, as they were harnessing up, Dolly, who had never been conspicuous for anything, went suddenly mad. She announced her condition by a long, heart-breaking wolf howl that sent every dog bristling with fear, then sprang straight for Buck. He had never seen a dog go mad, nor did he have any reason to fear madness. Yet he knew that here was horror, and fled away from it in a panic. Straight away he raced with Dolly, panting and frothing, one leap behind, nor could she gain on him, so great was his terror, nor could he leave her, so great was her madness. He plunged through the wooded breast of the island, flew down to the lower end, crossed the back channel filled with rough ice to another island, gained a third island, curved back to the main river, and in desperation started to cross it. And all the time, though he did not look, he could hear her snarling just one leap behind. Francois called to him a quarter of a mile away, and he doubled back, still one leap ahead, gasping faintly for air, and putting all his faith in that Francois would save him. The dog driver held the axe poised in his hand, and as Buck shot past him, the axe crashed down upon Matt Dolly's head. Buck staggered over against the sled, exhausted, sobbing for breath, helpless. This was speech opportunity. He sprang upon Buck, and twice his chest sank into his unresisting foe, and ripped and tore the flesh to the bone. Then Francois' lash descended, and Buck, as the satisfaction of watching speech, received the worst whipping as yet administered to any of the teams. "One devil, that speech," remarked Pero. "He will kill that Buck." "That Buck, 2 devils," was Francois' rejoined. "All the time I watched that Buck, I know for sure. Listen, he will spit him out on the snow. Sure, I know. From then on, it was war between them. Spitz, as a lead dog and acknowledged master of the team, felt his supremacy threatened by this strange Southland dog. And strange Buck was to him, for of the many Southland dogs he had known, not one had shown up worthily in camp and on trail. They were all too soft, dying under the toil, the frost, and starvation. Buck was the exception. He alone endured and prospered, matching the husky in strength, savagery, and cunning. Then he was a masterful dog, and what made him dangerous was the fact that the club of the man in the red sweater had knocked all blind pluck and rashness out of his desire for mastery. He was preeminently cunning and could bide his time with a patience that was nothing less than primitive. It was inevitable that the clash for leadership should come. Buck wanted it. He wanted it because it was his nature, because he had been gripped tight by that nameless, incomprehensible pride of the trail and trace. That pride which holds dogs in the toil to the last gasp, which lures them to die joyfully in the harness, and breaks their hearts if they are cut out of the harness. This was the pride of Dave as wheel dog of Sol-X as he pulled with all his strength. The pride that laid hold of them at break of camp, transforming them from sour and sullen brutes into straining, eager, ambitious creatures. The pride that spurred them on all day and dropped them at pitch of camp at night, letting them fall back into gloomy unrest and uncontent. This was the pride that bore up Spitz and made him thrash the sled dogs who blundered and shocked in the traces or hid away at harness up time in the morning. Likewise, it was this pride that made him fear Buck as a possible lead dog. And this was Buck's pride too. He openly threatened the other's leadership. He came between him and the shocks he should have punished, and he did it deliberately. One night there was a heavy snowfall, and in the morning Pike, the malingerer, did not appear. He was securely hidden in his nest under a foot of snow. Francois called him and sought him in vain. Spitz was wild with wrath. He raged through the camp, smelling and digging in every likely place, snarling so frightfully that Pike heard and shivered in his hiding place. When he was at last unearthed, and Spitz flew at him to punish him, Buck flew with equal rage in between. So unexpected was it, and so readily managed, that Spitz was hauled back and off his feet. Pike, who had been trembling abjectly, took heart at this open mutiny and sprang upon his overthrown leader. Buck, to whom fair play was a forgotten code, likewise sprang upon Spitz. But Francois, chuckling at the incident while unswerving in the administration of justice, brought his lash down upon Buck with all his might. This failed to drive Buck from his prostrate rival, and the butt of the whip was brought into play. Half stunned by the blow, Buck was knocked backward, and the lash laid upon him again and again, while Spitz soundly punished the many times offending Pike. In the days that followed, as those grew closer and closer, Buck still continued to interfere between Spitz and the culprits. But he did it craftily when Francois was not around. With the covert mutiny of Buck, a general insubordination sprang up and increased. Dave and Sol-X were unaffected, but the rest of the team went from bad to worse. Things no longer went right. There was continual bickering and jangling. Trouble was always afoot, and at the bottom of it was Buck. He kept Francois busy, for the dog driver was in constant apprehension of the life and death struggle between the two, which he knew must take place sooner or later. And on more than one night, the sounds of quarreling and strife among the other dogs turned him out of his sleeping robe, fearful that Buck and Spitz were at it. But the opportunity did not present itself, and they pulled into Dawson one dreary afternoon with the great fight still to come. Here were many men and countless dogs, and Buck found them all at work. It seems the ordained order of things that dogs should work. All day they swung up and down the main street in long teams, and in the night their jingling bells still went by. They hauled cabin logs and firewood, frightened up to the mines, and did all manner of work that horses did in the Santa Clara Valley. Here and there Buck met Southland dogs, but in the main they were the wild wolf husky breed. Every night, regularly, at 9, at 12, at 3, they lifted a nocturnal song, a weird and eerie chant, in which it was Buck's delight to join. With the aurora borealis flaming coldly overhead, or the stars leaping in the frost dance, and the land numb and frozen under a spore of snow, this song of the huskies might have been the defiance of life. Only it was pitched in minor key, with long-drawn wailings and half-sobs, and was more the pleading of life, the articulate travail of existence. It was an old song, old as the breed itself, one of the first songs of the younger world in a day when songs were sad. It was invested with the woe of unnumbered generations, this plaint by which Buck was so strangely stirred. When he moaned and sobbed, it was with the pain of living that was of all the pain of his wild fathers, and the fear and mystery of the cold and dark that was to them fear and mystery, and that he should be stirred by it marks the completeness with which he harked back through the ages of fire and roof to the raw beginnings of life in the howling ages.